Hello there. Welcome, welcome. It's Saturday morning. And on Saturday mornings, once a month for the past year, we've had The Right Place, which is an opportunity for all those on my Write a Nonfiction book course to come together. We had guest speakers this year from how to build relationships with your local bookshop to get your book in there, how to do social media for a personal brand. We also had how to write a cookbook, children's books, and how to publish on Amazon if you really just don't have the capacity financially to get somebody in to help you with self-publishing. Although we did have Sam Swat come in at the beginning of the year from, Sam Pierce from Swat Books, who went through the process and why it's so important really to consider self-publishing. Yes, of course, you can go the traditional route. If you're lucky enough to get published or to get picked up by a publisher, then of course, that's a brilliant route to go. So there's no harm whatsoever in taking the path that suits you. The point is that as a nonfiction writer, we all are actually, and we all have so much to give. You've been doing a job for many years in your business. You've been running a department, you've grown in a niche, you might be a specialist something, and you can teach people the ins and outs of that profession. You might have a hobby that you've just flourished in, and you might want to share more about that as well. And if you've ever done a TED talk or a TEDx talk, that idea worth spreading in your talk is a book. So books are now one of those ways that you can raise your own profile. Because remember, if you have a message to deliver and maybe you coach, for example, and you have a certain charge for your coaching, not everyone can afford that coaching. Absolutely. That's one of the things, that's the way of the world, isn't it? But you can still reach more people with your book. You have a global opportunity for people to get your message, learn something from you, maybe transform something in their lives. So writing a nonfiction book is something that I think you should all be considering. Now, today's session is about celebrating what we've achieved this year, but also, most importantly, preparing for 2023. So writing, let's get your writing on track. And I know some of you started 2022 with great intentions. You know, a lot of us did a lot of writing, possibly, maybe journaling or blogging, or even started that book during lockdown. But now things are kind of going back to normal, and the rat race and life and the pace of life has picked up. So I'm going to share with you some thoughts that I'd like you to consider for your planning for 2023. Oh, I've got to get my years right. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you, and let's go for that. Okay. So before we get on to the preparing, I want you to spend some time considering what you've achieved. You might not think it's very important. You might have only sat down in March and spent an hour writing, and that's progress, because that means that you've got an idea and you want to write, you want to share that idea. So that success needs to be replicated, so that you can try and maybe 2023 produce a little bit more writing. Maybe you've written one blog post all year and you think, oh, that's terrible, that's not worth celebrating. Oh, yes, it is. So let's consider the wins first. And I want you to spend some time going through your wins. Take a piece of paper, sit quietly, maybe put on some chill music. I always go, Alexa, play some chill music. And I get a couple of really brilliant tracks and playlists that can just get me in the mood. Now, you might enjoy classical music, so maybe do the same. Just put on a CD or some kind of music that just inspires you. to start thinking about what you can celebrate. Even if the idea is only brewing in your head, that's a step closer, actually. That really is, and that's worth celebrating in itself. So let's talk about preparation for 2023. So the first thing I'd like to say is that you need to start with your story. Now, we have a lot going on in our heads. Oh, yes, we do. We've decided that we're a certain person. And when I was teaching, I remember kids saying to me, well, you know, my dad says it's okay for me not to worry about maths because everyone in the family is terrible at maths. That's a story that we put in our heads. And we need to start when we prepare with our story. And I'll give you a little bit of an example here. So I decided to do my DNA testing a few Christmases ago. There was a special at Ancestry.com, and this was my result. I was thrilled. So 65% was England and Northwest Europe. So the breakdown is Yorkshire, the East Midlands, North Yorkshire, East Riding, Lincolnshire. Then I had some Swedish blood, which is very exciting for me, Scottish, because often, you know, I do feel like I am going home sometimes when I go to Scotland. I do enjoy a trip to Scotland. Germanic Europe, that makes sense, especially with my Afrikaans and far back Dutch history, so that makes sense. Norway, well, of course, the Swedish and Norway, Vikings. I'm thrilled to be of Viking stock. Irish, well, I think I'm quite funny sometimes, so maybe I do have a bit of Irish in me. And Wales. I have no connection with Wales. I live about an hour and a half away, so maybe I should be exploring a little bit more of my Welsh ancestry. It's only 2%, but it makes up something, and that's important too. Now, I can take this and create my story. So if we look at each of those in a breakdown. So first of all, if you look at Yorkshire. Now, if you say the people in Yorkshire, a very good trait is that they are really friendly, but maybe a bad trait might be argumentative. Now, this is a complete generalization, and it's just for a little bit of fun. So please don't take offense if you're from Yorkshire or you're from any of these districts, regions, or countries. It's just for a little bit of fun that we stereotypically put certain nationalities in a box, don't we? So it's quite interesting if you think about, lots of people have said, oh, South Africans are quite brash. South Africans are straight to the point. Now, of course, there's South Africans that aren't, but that's a general perception. So this is just for a little bit of fun. Now, if we take the Swedish, now a good trait could be that they are humble, but a bad trait could be that they might be unfriendly and cold. Scottish, practical, down to earth, but maybe they're a little bit stubborn. The Welsh, they work hard, they play hard, but maybe a bad trait is that they are worried and grumpy. Now, I am also a Cancerian. Now, we can look at some of the good traits of a Cancerian. A loyal friend for life. Now, maybe a bad trait could be difficult to approach, overly sentimental, or moody. Now, my partner would probably agree with some of those. I'm also an only child. Now, there's all sorts of assumptions of only children, that they are, a good trait might be that they are well adjusted, they're quite independent, but a bad trait might be that they are bossy and low self-control, which is an interesting concept as well. Now, I also grew up without a father. So the traits could be, the good trait could be that I am quite mature and I communicate well with all ages, but a bad trait might be that I'm most likely to be a drug addict or end up in prison. Now, my father was an alcoholic. So a good trait is that maybe I could develop a respect for alcohol, and a bad trait might be likely to suffer from depression myself. So I could create a story about all of those aspects, and I could say, well, my story is, this is who I am. I can't change who I am. I am argumentative. I'm unfriendly and cold and stubborn and worried and grumpy. I can be difficult to approach and overly sentimental or moody, bossy, low self-control, most likely to be a drug addict and end up in prison and likely to suffer from depression. That's who I am. That's what my DNA tells me. I cannot change that. That could be story number one that I believe about myself. But we could also look at story number two. Now, story number two could be all the good traits of those DNA aspects of me. Friendly, humble, practical, down to earth, hardworking, play hard, loyal friend, well-adjusted, independent, mature, communicate well with all ages, and respect for alcohol. Now, there's two stories there, and I can choose either one of those, and I can live my life according to the story that I choose. So I can use my story either to build myself up, or I can use it to hold me back. Now, we as writers know that one of the big things about writing is that I was terrible at English. I was awful at school when it came to writing. Or no one would really take me seriously. Who am I? I'm not J.K. Rowling. Well, J.K. Rowling was you before she started. You know, business people who've written the most amazing business books. They were you when they started. They had something to share, and they did. So let's have a look at your story, which is always personal to you. No one can prescribe that story. No one can come up with the concepts around that story. So it's important for you to remember that there is never a formula to goal setting, because you're going to use your story to move into your future. But we have to start with that story. And all those assumptions we have to accept don't exist. They're assumptions. As I said at the beginning, you know, it's just a bit of fun that some nationalities are known for certain things. I think Italians, I always believe, speak with their hands, you know. That doesn't mean that every Italian speaks with their hands, but it's a general conception and perception that they do. So it's a bit of fun, but the point I'm trying to make is that we have to start with our story. We really have to start with where we come from and what we believe to be true and set in stone about who we are. Now, we also have some barriers that we have to overcome. Now, we've already looked at some of the barriers we have to choose in our story, or choose not to choose in our story, but we've got some barriers here that may prevent us from putting pen to paper and maybe just getting on with that writing. There is a huge fear. Our fears are often irrational. They're real for us, but they're often completely irrational. I have a fear of snakes. It is an irrational fear that I seriously need therapy for that. But I know it's irrational. I know people who have a fear of spiders or frogs, or just the fear of, I don't know, using money, or we have fears that if we sat down and unpicked them, we would understand that they're irrational. Now, that doesn't mean that we can overcome them because we've decided they're irrational. The fact is that they're there and they're real for us. So a fear in writing could be, well, I can't write. I don't know what to say. No one will take me seriously when I hit publish, you know, who will buy my book. So it's all that stuff that goes on in our heads. There's an uncertainty in the future. You know, the past is kind of happened. It's set in stone. There's nothing we can do about it, but we don't know what tomorrow brings. So there's a huge barrier of uncertainty that I might not have the time. I'm starting a new job, you know, I've got a child coming, it's on the way, and I don't really know if I'll fit it, you know, all the stuff that goes on. A big one about writers is a sense of inadequacy. I am not good enough. No one cares about me. Nobody cares about my story, my writing, my insights. And that's a very big barrier that we really have to push through. And then there's the comfort zone. Now, I had a TEDx. I ran the TEDx here in the town that I live in Somerset recently. And one of the ladies did a fantastic talk. I'll pop the link with this. but a talk about the comfort zone, that it doesn't really exist. And actually, by creating a comfort zone, we are creating a barrier for ourselves, because we're saying, oh, I can't step out of my comfort zone, or it's so scary outside there. But there's no definition for a comfort zone. So are we creating an unnecessary space where we feel comfortable, and it's too scary to step out of? It's not really there. So it's a whole concept to consider. And I'd love you to watch Caroline Sherrard's TEDx talk about the comfort zone. You can even look that up on YouTube. So go Caroline Sherrard, TEDx Froome, and I'll pop all the details in with the video as well. So there is a huge barrier, which is a comfort zone barrier, a fear of inadequacy, uncertainty, and fear. So what I think is important is to start identifying in your story and in your barriers what is holding you back. And it's great to take a piece of paper and again sit down and just spend some time contemplating what in your story and with your barriers, which I'll add in there, is holding you back. Be honest with yourself. This is for nobody else. This is just for you. And what in your story, now we start thinking about, is giving you inspiration. What barriers are giving you inspiration? Now, I have spoken to many writers who have overcome something that was a barrier and has now freed them into creating. So they may have a life-threatening condition. They may have a life-changing illness, maybe a mental health struggle. So really, those, although there were barriers at the beginning, have been flipped and are now inspiration. And that's part of setting your goals, is how do you find that inspiration in some of those barriers or the negative aspects of your story? Now, there are dynamics in life that I think are important to consider, because we need to balance our life. You know, I had a friend who ate 7 oranges a day. She went orange. We all know oranges are healthy, but too much of them is not great. So we need to find that balance. So let's look at some of the dynamics in our life that we need to consider. So we have the dynamic of self. And this is the individual, your body, your mind, your immediate possessions, your individuality that you express fully. So that is you. That's the essence of who you are. And in writing, this could be quite an interesting area to tap into. Why are you writing? Are you writing for yourself? And that's a great thing. There's nothing wrong with writing for yourself. It's actually where it should start. Then you have your family. Now, family can be used in all sorts of contexts. The people you live with, your parents, siblings, cousins. Family is about creating a foundation for the future, but also there's an incredible sense of creativity in a family unit, because remember, you've got people of different ages coming together in a family. And it's obviously the area where we raise children, give them the opportunities we'd like to give them, the inspiration we'd like to give them. And often things can happen collectively as a family when we take on family activities. So I want you to have a think about how you can apply these elements to your creativity, but also find balance with your writing in relation to your family. Are they bought on the idea? Do they give you the space to create? Do they know that mum, dad needs to sit down and spend an hour? Or are they part of the process? Let's sit down and write a children's book together, or whatever it is. Now, group is interesting. Each group has a different dynamic, but think about your grouping as your state, your nation, your race, community groups that you belong to locally, online. And these could be made up of friends or strangers. So it could be a book club of friends. It could be where you work, your organization or your company. But there is a collection of people that play a role in your life too. And again, this could be out of balance when it comes to your writing. You might take a lot of work home in the evening, and then you have no space, capacity, or the time or the energy to write in the evening, because maybe your group dynamic is completely out of sync with your desire to write. I have a friend who has decided to make her working week 4 days. She has said to her employer, I will do the work in 5 days, or you can only employ me for 4, but I do need an extra day a week because that's what I want to do. I want to write. And then she invests all her time and energy on that day that she has off from work to build a business around her writing. Because remember, writing is a business. You have to treat it as a business. Then there's the next dynamic, which is humankind. And that's the survival of men and women for men and women. Often this is where people find their inspiration in humankind. You know, it could be research projects. It could be you have a view of the world and the way things can shift and transform. You have inspiration that you can share with others. So often this is an area of creativity. But one of the struggles, I think, with humankind is that seems to be at the end of the list of the balance that we consider in our lives. So, as I said, we often write for ourselves, absolutely fine. We might even write for our family. If I can make this into a business, I might be able to leave my job and have more flexible time with my children at home, for example. But humankind is a completely different topic. And often I wonder how we can build this into our lives. It could be as simple as having writing groups globally. Maybe your topic is of relevance. Maybe it's, I can't even think of all the examples. And that's the sad state of affairs, because we haven't really considered humankind. I'd love some more ideas with you around the kind of the dynamics of life and how we can slot that into this dynamic of humankind. And then we have life. And this is all living things, birds, animals, insects, plants, things that are directly and intimately motivated by life. And often we find our inspiration for writing with nature, don't we? This is where we are completely connected as a human being to the greater good, to the purpose of the planet. We slot into our place. I think that's something to consider when we write. So finally, we move on to the spirituality, and spirituality, you know, so many people have spoken about writing being such a cathartic experience for them. It's an opportunity to deal with issues, to share their struggles, and just the time spent alone is often enough. You might write only purely for your own personal spirituality, and not consider other people in that process, which is fine. And maybe you're going to write and stick it on in a book and hide it away under lock and key, and that's also absolutely fine. That's a really important part of writing. So this is where you explore yourself as a spiritual being, with or without identity. You know, sometimes just stripping yourself back to be the human, without the constraints of nationality or being a mother or being, you know, a carer or whatever it is, but you strip yourself back, and it's about purely being. And this is in the space where we create and thrive. So it's important to sit down and, again, with pen and paper, work out what dynamic in your life has suffered. Maybe you have put too much attention onto family and not enough on self. And self is where you spend time writing. Maybe spirituality has suffered, and that's where you get your inspiration. But on the other hand, we also want to celebrate the dynamics that have flourished. So maybe you have done very well in groups. You've volunteered, you've got a pay rise, you have been promoted at work. You know, all of those things are worth celebrating. So never consider them as a failure because they don't fit into the balance of everything. The trick now is to work out how you can incorporate the dynamics that have suffered into the dynamics that have flourished. So how do we start with the transformation? Because we find ourselves now having assessed our story, we've looked at dynamics, we've looked at our barriers. So what I'd like you to do is consider where you want to be this time next year. So in 2023, in December, you want to be able to say, I have done A, B, and C. I want to celebrate that I have done A, B, or C. And this is where the tricky part comes in. So if you can write down where you want to be in the next 12 months, consider what you need to do in the next 24 hours to make that happen. That could be as simple as I need to clear the desk so that I can have a space to sit down. And I can do that this afternoon, or I can do that this evening or tomorrow morning. What can you do in a week? And that could be as simple as I'm going to post on social media and tell everyone I am now writing this book, because that's something proactive that you are now sharing with the world. And again, in a month, and what you can do in 6 months, so that you can make that goal of December 2023, whatever it is that you want to achieve, finite. And what I think makes a goal or some kind of ambition alive and give it life is to share it with other people. When you keep it cards close to your chest, you are giving yourself an option to opt out. It's a get out clause, isn't it? But I think what really works is to start thinking about a personal mantra, the thing that you can say to yourself when you get out of bed in the morning. You can say, today is the day that, and every day could be that day. The day that you face the sunshine, or the day that you know, it's got to be personal. It's got to be completely personal to you. It's got to be authentic. So it's not worth finding something that someone that inspires you has said. And that personal mantra is not just a quote to live by. It's an expression of who you are that you have created. Now you can find different ways of finding your mantra. You could maybe start journaling and pull some concepts that keep recurring in your journaling. Play with words. You know, you want to be a writer. You enjoy the written word. Write some words down and start thinking about what they mean to you, and create the statement of declaration, something that is who you are. And once you come up with that, and it gives you a sense of joy when you read it, and it really gets you in your heart and soul, I think what's important is to put that in your profiles on your website, your about section, your social media profiles. Get it out there. Your personal mantra is your values. It's what's important to you and the person that you are. Another phrase you could think of is, when I feel like giving up, I will tell myself. Maybe that's a reminder of your personal mantra. In my Write a Nonfiction book course, we start off with our why. Why are you writing this book? And often that leaves people quite choked up. I want to share the story because I think other people will feel value in it. I want to tell people how they can change. Well, change is not a word I like to use because that implies something was wrong before. Maybe transform is something a little bit more. So yeah, that might be the post-it note that goes on the mirror in the bathroom, or it might be the one that goes on the board in the kitchen with a shopping list, or pasted onto the fridge. So a little bit of a recap. Start with your story when you are considering your plans for 2023. Identify your barriers. Look at your different dynamics and consider how to balance them, what you've given more attention to in the last 12 months. Act for transformation. Consider what you need to do in the next 24 hours, week, month, 6 months, to start seeing that goal becoming a little bit more real, and create a personal mantra. And finally, I love this woman. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf is such an inspirational human being. And she said, if your dreams don't scare you, you aren't dreaming big enough. Oh, amen to that. Amen to that. So that's really my goal. Goal setting sounds a little bit 1970s, doesn't it? That's my, I suppose, my philosophy when it comes to setting goals. And this time of the year, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, it's getting a little bit dark and it's feeling a little bit more cozy. Turn on the lamps, turn on some, light some candles, play some music, and just find that joy and inspiration in creating. And part of that creating process for you for 2023 is creating this journey that you want to be on, because that in itself could be a book. I think about me writing my book about walking tour guiding, and people said to me, how did you do that? And that's where my course has come out of writing a nonfiction book. I shared the process. So maybe the process of you going through all of this, or whatever it is that you experiencing, might become the thing that your signature thing. Does that make sense? So thank you for joining me. It's been a real thrill to spend some time with you. I'm going to pop some of the links into the notes, and I hope that you can find some value in those. And I wish you the very best for the last part of this year, but also I'd love to hear your goals. So if you want to share them, please get in touch. If you want to do it publicly, please share them on the Facebook page or share them with me on Instagram. I'm also on Mastodon. Oh, so very clever of me. So I think that's it's quite an interesting concept. So you are welcome to follow me. I'll have to put the details there. It's the new social media platform, which is a very different experience. It has no algorithms. I know. I'll chat to you soon. Thank you so much.